Hey everyone, what did Sammy Gravano's skipper really think about him? We're going to touch on that today because uh other day I watched a video that Sammy Gravano did about his skipper, Salvatore Toddo Aurello. And it was pretty interesting. A lot of the stuff I already knew, but it was interesting when he talked about the relationship that he had with Toto. And so I did a lot of research on Toto, and some of the information that Sammy said doesn't really jive with my sources, but we're going to talk about it. It's really an interesting story. And I know a few I don't know, a couple of years ago, I did something on Toto, I believe with Lee, but in the last 2 years, I've been able to get a lot more information about Toto and the crew he was involved with, how he became a captain, um, all of that stuff. And so I want to share everything I have on Toddo Aurello, a really fascinating old school guy. And then we're going to touch on what Sammy Gravano said about Totto not really having a problem with him flipping. So we will address that. Please do me a favor and hit the like button. And also, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, please consider doing so. We'd love to have you. And without further delay, on to our feature presentation. Salvatore Toddo Aurello wasn't the kind of guy who ended up on the front page of the New York Post. He wasn't flashy, he wasn't loud, but make no mistake, every made guy in the Gambino family knew who he was, and more importantly, they respected him. This is a story of a Brooklyn mobster who started off as a so-called dress bandit in a wild robbery gone sideways and ended up being the man who helped Carlo Gambino lock down power in one of the most important mafia civil wars of the 20th century. He was the mentor to Sammy the Bull Gravano long before the betrayal and the cousin of Jimmy Brown Paella. He was a capo who never saw a courtroom, never got pinched, and walked away from the life with his honor and silence intact. In a world built on loyalty, violence, and codes, Toddo Aurello proved that the quietest guy in the room might just be the most dangerous. Salvatore Albarello, better known in the streets as Toddo Aurello, was born on March 16, 1914. His family was from Agrigento, Sicily, and they made the journey to America like many others in the early 20th century, settling first on Manhattan's gritty Lower East Side, then moving to Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, after his father passed in the late 30s. By 1940, Toto, still in his mid-20s, was the man of the house, head of the family, and already dipping his toe into the street life. At just 20 years old, Toto made the papers for the first and almost the last time. It was May 1934, and the tabloids dubbed him the Dress Bandit. Why? Because he and two young stick-up kids stormed into an apartment on Prince Street, pulled a gun on two women, and made them strip down to their stockings, and then robbed them. Here's the kicker. They made the women undress to delay them from calling the cops. But these ladies, they leaned out the window half-dressed and screamed bloody murder. A patrolman nearby heard the ruckus, chased the getaway car, even let off 10 rounds during the pursuit. The crew scattered, but Toto, he got nabbed. Charged with attempted assault and armed robbery, he was looking at some real time. But in true mob story fashion, the case mysteriously fell apart. The women couldn't ID him in court. And just like that, the charges were dropped. That little episode, it taught Toto a lesson. Attention gets you pinched. Silence keeps you free. From that point forward, he kept his name and his business out of the papers. By the late 1930s and into the 40s, Toddo Aurello had moved beyond petty street crimes. He was now running with real players, Brooklyn's toughest street crews, and making himself known in the world of organized crime. This was a time when the five families were taking shape in their modern form, and Toto found himself in the orbit of the Mangano family. That's the family that would later become the Gambinos. His first real mentor, Armand Tommy Rava, a seasoned capo in the Mangano crew, and a guy who ran a tight crew out of Brooklyn. Rava was no joke. His crew had muscle and, more importantly, brains. Guys like Neil Delacroce, who go on to become underboss of the entire family, were already earning under Rava. And right there with them, a young Salvatore Toddo Aurello, quiet, watchful, reliable, the kind of guy bosses love because he didn't talk and he didn't draw heat. By the early 1950s, law enforcement already had their eye on him. The NYPD intelligence squad tagged him as a known figure in Brooklyn's organized crime circles. But Toto knew how to move smart. He kept his hands clean, his name out of courtrooms, and his crew tight. Somewhere in that post-war period, Toto got his button, officially made into Cosa Nostra, and we know it happened before 1957 because when the books closed that year, his name was already on the list. While other guys chased headlines and flashy rackets, Toto made a reputation the old-fashioned way, with loyalty, discretion, and earned respect from the men who mattered. 1957, it was a year of blood and betrayal in the underworld. Albert Anastasia, the boss of the family Toto belonged to, was clipped in broad daylight while sitting in a Manhattan barbershop. That rub-out wasn't random. It was Carlo Gambino's move. A hostile takeover that put him at the top of what would become the Gambino family. But not everyone was ready to kiss the ring. Armand Tommy Rava, Toto's old capo, an old-school loyalist to Anastasia, didn't trust Gambino's quiet smile. Rava started quietly rallying crews, building a faction, even dreaming about taking the throne for himself. And now here's where things get murky and deadly. Toto had been Rava's guy, came up under him. But when the split came, Toto didn't just change sides. He helped end the rebellion permanently. FBI records and underworld sources paint a vivid picture. In late 1958, Rava takes a trip to Florida, and it would be his last. Toto, now aligned with Gambino, is said to have led the hit team. They ambush Rava on a Florida highway. Rava gets out of the car unarmed, probably thinking he can talk his way out of it, and according to an FBI informant, Toto steps forward and tells him, "I've got a contract." Rava, defiant to the end, sneers, "You're not qualified to kill a man of my stature." Insulted, Toto and his crew open fire. Rava's hit but doesn't fall. He's bleeding, staggering, still standing, with all that old school toughness. But it wasn't enough. They finished the job with pistol whips to the head and burying him deep in Florida. And from that moment on, the rebellion was over. Gambino was firmly in control. And Toto? He had proven himself in the most final way possible by taking out his own former skipper. It was a brutal, bloody chess move, and Toto made it like a master. From that day forward, he wasn't just respected, he was feared. After the dust settled from the Rava hit, Carlo Gambino wasted no time reshuffling the deck. Captains who stayed loyal were promoted, and those who backed Rava, demoted, cast out, or worse. One of these promotions came a little later, but it was well earned. When Petey Pumps Ferreira, a Gambino loyalist who had absorbed Rava's old crew, died in 1969, Don Carlo looked to one man to take the reins, Salvatore Toddo Aurello. Now officially a capo regime, Toto was no longer a soldier. He was running his own crew. And not just any crew. This was a Brooklyn outfit with deep roots, heavy hitters, and turf stretching from Kings County to Staten Island and even parts of Jersey. Toto wasn't flashy. He wasn't driving Cadillacs with gold trim or wearing diamond pinky rings. That wasn't his style. He focused on the work, running gambling operations, loan sharking, enforcing when needed, all without bringing heat. In fact, that was part of his brilliance. Senate committees, FBI files, they all knew there was a guy named Aurello in the Gambino family, but they didn't know much else. Inside the family, though, Toto had pull. Carlo Gambino respected him. Castellano respected him. Even Della Croce, who fought on the other side of that Civil War, knew Toto was a steady hand and the kind of guy who could sit at a table and mediate a dispute without breaking a sweat. Toto wasn't making headlines, but he was making order, and in a life ruled by chaos, that kind of quiet strength is priceless. By the 1970s, Toddo Aurello was well into his 50s, a made man for over 2 decades, now a respected captain in the Gambino family. And that's when a new face showed up, a strapping, wild, ambitious kid named Salvatore Gravano. Back then, Gravano wasn't with the Gambinos. He had started off with the Colombo family, but internal beef, particularly with a guy named Shorty Sparrow, had him looking for a new home. Enter Toto. Through his son, Charlie Boy Aello, who had been childhood friends with Sammy, Toto meets Gravano, and something about the kid strikes him. Fearless, loyal, and hungry to prove himself. Toto took him under his wing, showed him how to move the right way in Cosa Nostra. Not just muscle, protocol, politics, when to talk and when to shut up. In 1976, when the Mafia finally opens its books again, Toto didn't hesitate. He sponsored both his son Charlie Boy and Sammy the Bull Gravano to be formally inducted into the Gambino family. That same night, two kids from Brooklyn, childhood friends, officially became made men. For Toto, it was a proud moment. He wasn't just building a crew, he was building a legacy, and by Christmas of 1977, he made it official. Sammy was now his acting capo. Toto trusted him so much he began stepping back, spending more time in South Florida while Sammy helped run the day-to-day. Gravano ran with that freedom, built up powerful connections. He started making some serious money, and through it all, Toto stayed in the background as a quiet mentor, offering advice but letting the new generation take over. And there was real love there. Sammy called Toto a second father. He always made sure the old man got paid, even more than required out of just pure respect. But no one could have predicted what would come next. By 1986, the world of the Gambino family was changing fast. Boss Paul Castellano had been taken out in front of Sparks Steakhouse, and John Gotti, the flashy, fearless, and media-savvy guy, had taken the throne. But Toddo Aurello, he is from a different era. No headlines, no cameras. At 72 years old, he had spent over 5 decades in the life, and with Gotti now steering the ship in a new direction, Toddo made his move. He stepped down, retired. No indictment, no courtroom, just quietly walked away, the same way he had always moved. The FBI noted it. Toddo officially handed over control of his crew around 1986. At first, Sammy Gravano, who had already been running the crew's day-to-day, kept control as the official capo regime. But when Gotti made Sammy his consigliere, Gravano recommended a new leader for the old Toddo crew, and that's Louis Big Lou Valario. This was a crew Toddo built from the ground up, with guys like Joe Peruta, Louis Melito, old school earners and enforcers, and now it was officially out of his hands. But retirement was peaceful. What came next wasn't. In 1991, the Mafia world gets hit with a nuclear betrayal. Sammy the Bull Gravano flips, turns informant, testifies against Gotti and dozens of other mobsters, and it sends shockwaves through Cosa Nostra. And for Toddo, it wasn't just a betrayal of a Murta, it was personal. This was the kid he had brought in, sponsored, groomed, treated like a second son. And now Sammy was tearing down the family Toddo had served his entire life, from Vincent Mangano to John Gotti. One writer put it perfectly. Toddo taught Gravano the ropes, but apparently some key lessons were missed. Also had another guy say that Toddo took Gravano under his wing and groomed him, but despite his best efforts, it seems Toddo either neglected to teach some key lessons or Gravano missed the value of them. It stung. This wasn't just a crew member flipping. This was the protege, the pride of his later years, and now he is called a cancer on the Borgata. And Toddo, by extension, felt that shame. Toddo was said to be furious, heartbroken. One account even says he must have had a fit as the old man watched from the sidelines, knowing full well that he was personally responsible for bringing such a cancer into their Borgata. He didn't try to retaliate. He didn't talk to the press. He just stayed in South Florida, keeping his silence. But those who knew him said he regretted ever putting his name behind Sammy the Bull Gravano. Because in the Mafia, your name means everything. And when the man you vouch for becomes the government's star witness, that's a stain that never washes off. Salvatore Toddo Aurello lived to see the 1990s, a rarity in the life. He passed away quietly in February of 1998 at the age of 83. No courtroom, no RICO charges, no front page headlines, just a quiet funeral for a man who lived and died in the shadows. And maybe that's how Toddo wanted it. No flash, no spectacle, just loyalty, honor, and silence. His name doesn't come up as often as Gotti's or Gravano's, but among mob historians and those who really know this life, Toddo Aurello was respected deeply. He survived wars within the family. He helped settle one by removing Tommy Rava. He mentored future leaders, for better or worse, and he upheld the Mafia code when others abandoned it. But there's no denying the sting of this final chapter, that the man he helped raise inside the life, Sammy the Bull, would go on to betray everything Toddo believed in. It left a scar on an otherwise disciplined career. Still, in the eyes of Cosa Nostra, Toddo never broke, never talked, never folded. That alone cements his legacy. In the end, he was a quiet ending to a quiet career, but one marked by respect, survival, and old-school honor. And in a life where most men go out in cuffs or coffins, that's no small thing. If you enjoy this story and want more deep dives into the men behind the myths, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. Thanks for watching Real Mob Stories with James Proctor. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and God bless you always.